Ah, yes, today I must provide my 0 fans who browse my Twitter the sustenance of content they require today. But first, we need to check trending so I can get some inspiration. Looks like something new about Dream again. Ah, yes, I love seeing Dream on my Twitter trends, even though his fans are usually a bunch of brain-dead 12-year-old girls whose opinions make everyone in the room uncomfortable, and is the overwhelming reason they don't have friends and are introverts. And would you look at that? It does seem that every Dream stan is now signing a contract that requires them to suck Dream's 1 angstrom wide cock, and also sacrifice their entire family for some guy they don't even know but worship him anyways. Judging by how edgy and completely condescending that intro segment was, you'd probably assume I'd be here talking about Dream and his fanbase. While I think that both Dream and his fanboys can literally just go outside for at least one moment, this is about something even worse. It's quite worrying, and yet somehow worse than Dream. Have we reached a point in society where even Twitter is worse than Dream and his fanbase? Yes. His fanbase makes up a good percentage of why this website is complete dog shit now. Not to say that it was ever really good, it was usually only decent or mediocre. But with the turn of basically 2018 and 2019, the rise of cancel culture, and not to get political, but Trump, we here at Trash Files have seen an overwhelming amount of mentally ill users entering the website. And yes, we did contact the SCP Foundation and Twitter, although not an SCP, it's labeled as a dangerous entity and mental institution for the worst people on the internet. So yes, today in Trash Files, we are diving on the topic of Twitter, its complete and utter insanity, and how it's giving way for society to literally change the point where things that would be considered incredibly gross and disgusting 5 years ago would now become completely normal. You may ask me this, isn't this just going to be a copy of your Reddit censorship video? While I wish I could say yes, in some ways, Twitter is miles worse than Reddit. The things that go on there are just examples of why we need to nuke ourselves right here and then. Ranging from pedophilia being considered a sexuality, to cancel culture, and militant political activists slowly turning America into a place for brain-dead people. So with all that banter that will follow, and Chernobyl, but as a social media website, let's dive in. Keep in mind that this is a horrible social media website and the users that inhabit it. For what I say in this video, it is inherently satire. Trash Files is a satire series. But today's video will be discussing a serious issue that happens with anonymity and the complete lack of authority in social media websites that need to be regulated. Also, for when I talk about people and their pronouns or made up sexualities, I want to remind you guys that I support LGBTQ, but don't support those who completely make up nonsensical and stupid sexualities that aren't even sexualities, and rather just liking or worshipping something because they're ill. Alright, let's get wacky. I would like to cover the history of Twitter, but ultimately it's like any other social media. What makes Twitter somewhat unique is just how insanely toxic and annoying the users are. Now, if you're a Twitter user and just think that I am assuming things and think that all Twitter users are bad, well, you're right. But you see, it doesn't matter. Just go on any Twitter trend or anything on Twitter that has to do with politics or LGBTQ, or science, and in the replies, almost everyone is arguing or just insulting each other. Now, it's not to say that it's much different from Facebook, but the key difference from both is that Twitter has a combination of both crazy Karens and boomers and zoomers and millennials and politicians. In theory, this website is pretty good. You follow someone or an organization, you see all tweets and activity from them, or you follow a certain type of movement or group. And while that happens, ultimately in the end, it's a social media website. For whatever reason, probably just being anonymity, and the fact that free speech exists, which is also a good thing, it leads to essentially every single social media being bad. But in case you still don't have the point in your head about how bad Twitter is, let me simplify it. Let's put Twitter and all other social medias on a D&D alignment chart. So multiple social media might be put in the same category, so bear with me. I would put Facebook and Twitter at chaotic evil, and pretty much no good ever happens in them. Literally nothing good. Both house incredibly insane and mentally ill people. I would label 4chan true neutral. I mean, not much to explain why, they're both good and bad. I would put Reddit either chaotic evil or chaotic neutral. I say evil because blatant censorship happens there, and also just the general disorder of subreddits. I already made a video talking about the problems of Reddit, so you can just watch that. I would label Instagram as either neutral or just neutral good. I can't really say much about Instagram, but the fact that I barely hear about it on the news apart from when kids commit suicide because of it, Instagram isn't usually bad. I would label YouTube as chaotic neutral. It's either good or they ruin the entire goddamn platform. And yeah, essentially. Twitter is chaotic evil. Literally at the top of my head, I can't name a single instance of Twitter doing really any kind of good. I know it sounds hypocritical considering that I use it, but just honestly, Twitter doesn't offer much but a loss of your faith in humanity. In fact, KSI and PewDiePie quit Twitter because of how shitty it is. People's mental health has gotten better because of them quitting. Do you know how insane that is? Once more on the internet, politics is a taboo that just always seems to incite one side to insult and thrash the other. Twitter is the ultimate example. How about we do a speed run? We're going to go on a Twitter trend that has to do with Joe Biden or vaccines or COVID, and let's see how fast we find a toxic thread. One on Dr. Anthony Fauci. This will be very great. Oh boy. See how fast it was? Yep. Now look, I know it's about COVID vaccines and Fauci, and that's controversial and all, but either way, my point still stands. Now, politics is a major reason why Twitter has become such a shithole in the past few years, primarily because it's arguably the most popular website for politicians and celebrities to have a Twitter account. And in their replies and other threads about them, you will find their supporters and opposition battling it out to an ultimately useless end. Now, politics on the internet is already a shithole, not much to say about it, but on Twitter, it's on a completely different level. Like, seriously, people will call you retarded or insult you for having an opinion. Well, given if you insult them as well, because to be honest, nobody is civil on this website. Militant political activists are still only like 5% more of toxic Twitter users, although it definitely seems like a lot more. All I'm gonna say is that if you want to have a civil political discussion or argument, don't do it on Twitter or anywhere on social media for that matter. Do it with consenting friends or consenting strangers. Alright, this is definitely the majority of the Twitter population. Now, when I mean social justice warrior, I mean it for a different reason. On Twitter, there are a somewhat large number of individuals that are primarily either black women or people with pronouns who are gatekeeping sexuality and race, which is quite funny to observe. Some black women on Twitter actually have the incredibly sexist and sometimes even racist views of men. Sexist as in you have to shut up on Women's Day and that they hate on International Men's Day. And racist as in you can't just unfortunately be white anywhere near them, or find a white chocolate Snickers instead of a brown one. Or saying that Please Lives Matter. Now for people with a heavy amount of pronouns in their name and also support for various ideologies like ACAB and whatever else and act like they're saints, and also the people that make up sexualities because they're mentally ill and 14 years old. No, seriously, this is quite depressing. It's quite an insult to actual LGBTQ individuals because the sexualities that they say are their own or just fake things that support some kind of character or person. So for example, the somewhat satire anime sexual. It's essentially just the sexuality of liking an anime character. See guys, let me draw you guys a chart of what are actual sexualities and what else is just a made up sexuality as a result of mental illness. So, as you see, we have gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary, bisexual, and literally everything else that actually makes sense as a sexuality because it's not something that's fictional. And then we have anime sexual, dream sexual, and yeah, you get it. Now, I understand that LGBTQ individuals throughout history have suffered lots of oppression, which has now resulted in same-sex marriage and other great laws. But I'm just gonna say, just because someone's straight instead of your stupid-ass made-up pronoun or the fake LGBTQ individuals who judge you for being straight don't deserve to be labeled anything nice. The problem nowadays is that there is a growing precedent on Twitter where you just can't call out a trans person, for example, because they just happen to be of opposite gender. In fact, as of writing the script, this similar situation happened on Reddit. On Twitter, you ultimately can't call anyone out who's LGBTQ, even if they genuinely did a horrible thing. But these incredibly ignorant users defend them because, well, you can't judge a gay person, don't you know the oppression of gay people? And while yes, gay people and others have suffered throughout history, it's the year 2021. Although there are still some instances of LGBTQ people being thrashed by laws from particularly bad states, ultimately, LGBTQ people aren't really being oppressed. So please, if you act like this on Twitter, you need to check into the nearest mental hospital immediately. There is no greater insult than being a person of the rainbow and yet judging people for their sexuality. I would also like to note that various trans communities and gay communities on Twitter are actually gatekeeping sexuality. So basically, they think that they are the best sexuality and everything else is not for LGBTQ. It's disgusting. Social justice warriors on Twitter are, if anything, worse than what Tumblr had. The fact that people of the rainbow are now trying to oppress people for being straight is the ultimate insult and irony to what their quote-unquote ancestors were fighting for. If anything, some of these people might actually not be LGBTQ, and only use it as a card of sorts, so that nobody can insult them and they get free passes to saying really bad shit to stay out of trouble. If you ever went on Twitter and saw a thread that talks about a member of the LGBT community, say, being a pedophile, you will most likely see actual real people defending them. Honestly, there is no word to describe these people. They just make everyone uncomfortable and disgusted. I suck his dick with a smile for hours at a time. You really thought I wasn't gonna mention Dream and his fanbase, weren't I? Well, you probably did. Alright, look. I don't like Dream, I don't like his stans. I do think that being a fan of him is okay, but being a stan is not. Twitter is their hub of stans being just fucking weird. Look, I will deal with all these profile pics and gay shipping art, but imagine to your surprise that some of these stans actually made gore porn fan art, which is essentially just one of the worst things you can imagine. Bruh, we have advances of species for thousands of years, only for these 14-year-old girls with 10 different mental illnesses creating gore porn art for some creator they don't even know personally. Imagine that they would have to be forced to show this shit to all their ancestors and current family members. Now, this is just nitpicking, considering that there are definitely worse communities, but unfortunately, Dream isn't that good at calling out these fans more. Communities always have a toxic or dark side. There's just no avoiding it. Certain people that are equally as ill as these gore porn drawers will always want to make everyone uncomfortable and ashamed. And look, honestly, my main nitpicks for Dream usually are just things I mention when I want to tell someone why I don't like Dream. While I don't think he's a good person, his community is what I think makes his image negative. Ultimately, the problems with Dream stans can also reflect Dream. Dream stans, and sometimes fans, tend to be incredibly defensive about Dream and gatekeep their Lord and Savior. Now, as you can see by this video I made on my second channel with a less than 85% like to dislike ratio, we can demonstrate this. I might as well mention that when I made those videos, the most common argument I had gotten was that those fans are a small percentage of the fanbase. And while that's true, I'm concerned about why I hear about it often. While yes, I guess certainly those who want to make a case against his fanbase would want to investigate this type of information and incriminate them, it shouldn't stop me from calling out the people who make this shit. Once more, there's nothing wrong with liking Dream, but plenty of things are wrong and over-obsessing about him and making gross fan art. My limit for myself is just a heavy amount of times that Dream trends on Twitter for no reason and all the profile pics of George.
When the notification goes out.
Oh my god, did you just see that shit? Dream breathed 2 oxygen particles instead of 3. Holy shit, guys, make this trending. Hashtag Dream beats God.
This is actually something genuine I will say. Do not use Twitter if you live a happy life. This website will turn you into the rest of them. You're going to reject your humanity. I reject my humanity, Jojo. I turn into a K-pop stand. Twitter is just essentially a mental hospital for the internet. While Facebook contains boomers, Twitter contains currently every living generation that's mentally ill. I will say that not everyone on Twitter is bad, but there is no argument for that basically 80% of Twitter users are most likely bad. Although Twitter has given us plenty of great internet memes and moments that define our generation, but because our generation is retarded along with some boomers and millennials, Twitter ultimately is just not a place for people with any sense of innocence should go for news or politics. You don't ever gain anything out of Twitter except a new hatred for humanity. To end off with this video, I think at this point possibly not many are interested in me speaking about these issues. Let's make it into a parody of Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. In 2006, Twitter was founded and the site was just not very crowded. But in 2007, that would all change and the site would begin in brand new ways. The internet was changing quite a lot and was not a trend or shoddy tiny dot technology that was very quite new, with a brand new way of seeing news too. Twitter would grow users as the days went on, but a threat was lurking ahead right on. But nobody could have expected that this threat was a change of society's rationalness. The site would begin to get more shitty as more users made changes, make it unsteady for the business to continue on till a new CEO had to go right on. Everyone is mentally ill, a great place to be. I'm not having any fun here. Nobody else is on your body. Is this social media or place of society's ultimate fate? This really just shows Twitter's on a down spiral mentally. Like many on the site, I was like a rabid dog that continues to bite, and all the celebrities and influencers trying to make this right, only for their own good and so-called rights. But what about all the funnies from these companies trying to make their brand entertaining, but suddenly out of nowhere appeared some militant political activists. They started being really retarded, full of logical fallacies. The problems are rights with things like vaccines and COVID at the heart. Honestly, society just needs to restart. Can it get any worse than this? This society is just a big pile of really dumb shit from the mentally ill around the world. Holy shit, my faith is in despair. Everyone is mentally ill. What a great place to be. I'm not having any fun here. Nobody else is on your buddy. Is this social media or place of society's ultimate fate? This is just a downward spiral. Angels sang out in a cry of despair. Down from the depths, up came pedos everywhere, who tried to make pedophilia a sexuality and a moral to criticize. Is this really real and possible that people want pedophilia to become legal and moral? What a surprise. Then I guess there is no cure for what they have in mind. Then Kimberly the Black and Karen the White, and the social justice warrior Knight, the K-pop stands and the Greens one as well. Donald Trump and Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro and Richard Spencer, Harvey Weinstein, every single conspiracy theorist, Fox News, CNN, and every press, discriminatory LGBTQ, all came out of nowhere, lightning fast, and made Twitter really shitty and ass. It was possibly the worst website seen by all, with normal people looking on in total love. Twitter shitty thing continues to last. Many lost good souls, and eventually the most retarded stood. The rest need to get better. Well, honestly, everyone's equally retarded. Everyone is mentally ill. A great place to be. I'm not having any fun here. Nobody else is on your buddy. Is this social media or place of society's ultimate fate? This really just shows. This really just shows. This really just shows. This really just shows. This really just shows Twitter's on a downward spiral mentally.